Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Charlie Fibrosis, and tonight I want to talk about something a little personal and just kind of give you my story at least. So, I know I've kind of talked about this a little bit in the past before, to varying degrees, but I kind of wanted to tell you about cystic fibrosis and how it kind of is in my life at least. The CF is different for everyone that has it. Some have got it better, others, unfortunately, are a little bit sicker. And it sucks. It's a tough disease to get through. But I think when you kind of hear my story and kind of hear my take on it, at least, and some of the things that I just kind of go through in the day, it'll give you guys a little bit of clarity as to what it's like, and a little bit of advice as well, or a little, at least maybe a little bit of happier feelings ahead to anyone who either has the disease or knows someone with it or anything else like that. As an additional note, May is the official month of cystic fibrosis, for cystic fibrosis awareness, and there's a lot of things that happen during this month. One of the things that I participate in is a annual walk in the lower part of Ohio, and we've done that for about 22 years, and I've only missed it like a couple of times. But we've done a lot of work with the CF Foundation, and I wanted to go ahead and talk about it. So, kind of here's my story. So, I was actually born 3 months early. I was set to be actually born in May, but I was born 3 months early, so I was born in February. Now, my prematurity, don't exactly know kind of how that came about. It just did. And the prematurity wouldn't have stopped my CF or anything else like that. Even if I was born on time, I'd still have cystic fibrosis, because it starts at the basic building block level of the creation of one's DNA. So both my parents are carriers of the gene for CF. They don't have it, but by having me, there was a 25% chance that they would have a child with CF. They did not know that. They didn't know that they were carriers, and I came about. And my 3 younger brothers, they are also carriers of the gene. They do not have the disease, so they are unaffected. But continuing on. So, born 3 months early. I was born. I was not breathing, or barely breathing for that matter. I was put on an incubator to warm my body up. I was put on a ventilator and oxygen. And things were wrong with me. Quite a few things were wrong with me. I couldn't breathe. I'll just be a little bit PG about this. I had digestive issues. And I also eventually got a blood infection too. So that didn't help either with my growth. Over time, over the few months, they did manage to figure out some things, and they managed to start working on me and getting me at least a little bit right. They found that I had hernias, so they had to go in and remove those. They found that my bowels had adhered to one another, so they had to separate that out. And they managed to clear up the blood infection, which was good. But they couldn't exactly figure out why I was not really improving lung-wise. To tell you this, as I had found out a little bit later on, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a double whammy. So because I was born premature and I was born at the stage I was in at about 6 months. Unfortunately, my lungs were not completely developed, so they thought that they would be able to like get everything right, and they were doing everything they could to like get my lungs right, but there was an underlying thing that the doctors didn't really know about. So one of the nurses, who I actually met up with about maybe 5 years ago, who I thanked for this, she questioned and wondered if I may have cystic fibrosis. Now you may be wondering, well, how exactly did they test for that? In the modern day, and I believe they could even do it in the 90s too, you can have prenatal screening to see if your baby is going to have cystic fibrosis. My parents did that with my 3 younger brothers. They are all fine. And like I said, they didn't know that they were carriers, and they didn't know about me. But how do you figure out if someone has cystic fibrosis based off of after birth? Well, what they do is they do a thing called a sweat test. And typically what they see is that, what they have seen is that when a person with cystic fibrosis sweats, everyone releases a little bit of salt on their skin, out of their skin. But with CF patients, for some reason, it's a lot more salt. They used to do things like they would give a baby a kiss on the forehead or so, and if their skin tasted salty, there was a good chance that they had cystic fibrosis. So somehow they test the salt content and everything else like that, or the amount of salt, and that can lead to figuring it out. The more modern solution, and what they've been doing for many decades now, is pretty simple. They put like a little pad of like silica gel or so. Not silica gel, but like a gel on your arm, and they heat it up, and then it causes your skin to sweat. Doesn't hurt or anything else like that. And then they take a vial and they collect the perspiration, and they go ahead and test it. And so the doctors really didn't know if that was going to work, or they didn't really think that was the answer. But this person went out and went on a limb, and she was absolutely right. So I got my care transferred from a Good Samaritan hospital to a children's hospital, which specializes in cystic fibrosis care, where we are. And they immediately started working on me to figure out what they could do to get me healthy. Now, the thing that sucks is even after we started my treatments and care, I was actually still on oxygen for the first few months I was back at home for the very first time. I got home at about May-ish or so, May or June. And so I was still kind of a mess. But they did figure out what they needed to do. So back in the day, when I was younger, they would... what I would do is I would get a albuterol nebulization into my lungs. So take a nebulizer, kind of what a person with asthma or COPD may use. Put the albuterol into it, nebulize it, turns it into a mist, inhale that. That takes about maybe 20 minutes or so for the treatment to finish. And then what they did was they had these little percussors. And the goal and even if you didn't have the percussors, you could take your hands and like pat on the back. So you pat on the back, you pat on the sides, you pat on the chest, and the goal is to loosen up the mucus in the lungs. Now, to give another piece of information, everyone has mucus in their lungs. The only difference is that for a cystic fibrosis patient, it has about the consistency of honey. And the problem is that when it's that thick, it's hard to get out. And because there's various bacteria and germs and all that stuff in the air that we breathe, let alone, you get bacteria in there. If you get like a virus or a cold or something like that, it can make it really, really hard to get those germs out because it just gives them a warm, damp place to exist. And in addition, it just clogs up the air sacs as well, which, that's not pleasant. That's not pleasant at all. We would do like maybe 2 to 3 percussive treatments on my back, chest, and sides, maybe about 2 to 3 times a day. And we'd do the albuterol, and I would go about and just do my day. Little boy growing up, I had occupational therapy to help with the learning issues that I had in terms of just being born early and everything like that. It took me forever to learn how to talk. I actually had to learn sign language for a little while, and I finally got to speaking, and everything was just kind of normal. By about, I think, around 1999 to 2000, I feel. Maybe 98 to 2000. A brand new device came out which was called the Vest Machine. Now, it still is widely used by the CF populace, but essentially what it was back in the day was this big metal box about the size of a suitcase that you would lug around an airport, like the ones with wheels and so. And had about 3 dials on it, one to control pressure, one to control frequency, and a kitchen timer style clock on the machine that you'd crank it over for 5 minutes and it would go ding, and a pedal to let it run. And what the Vest Machine does in every iteration is it shakes your chest. Doesn't really hurt. Sometimes it can cause a little bit of back stiffness just because of how rigid it makes your body a little bit because of the air pressure. And so, but it's not bad. It's not bad at all. But the goal is that by doing the albuterol, it, in tandem with it, it shakes it up, and then it makes it loosen in your lungs. And then by breathing in the albuterol and everything, and usually with a little bit of saline nebulized too, the goal is that will loosen it up. You can give it a few coughs, and you will get the mucus out of you, which will make you healthier. You can never clear the mucus out completely because there's so much in there. But the more that you can, as much mucus as you can clear out, the better you'll be. The one thing that sucks about this disease is it's progressive. It just generally gets worse as time goes on. Currently, at this time, I think the average age of a cystic fibrosis patient is about 37 years. Now, I'm 23, and thankfully, I've been actually pretty darn healthy for the most part. And we'll get into some more facts and figures later on, but eventually, for not every CF patient, but a good majority of them, they eventually have to get a lung transplant, and that can be a whole journey in and of itself. I am nowhere near sick enough to need a double lung transplant, but it can happen, and it usually does. But let's kind of continue on at least. So my lung function throughout most of my life has always been in the upper 90s. What it specifically is the FEV1 lung function is what mostly they're checking to make sure that's good. Essentially, your FEV1 is the amount of air that you can blow out after a deep inhale. If you can push so much air out in your biggest exhale, and it's positive and it's in a good number, you're good and healthy. So throughout most of my life, it's always been in like the mid upper 90s. Um, and if it's low, unfortunately, you generally have to go on antibiotics of some sort to try and clear out whatever germs or bacteria could be in your lungs. They also do sputum cultures to check and see if you're growing anything. Luckily, I've never grown anything like super, super serious in terms of like super bugs or anything really, really bad. It's generally just like general things in the air that have just kind of made their way down there. But I'm healthy. I'm generally pretty healthy. And I'm usually pretty on top of my treatment. So that's a key point of it, too. So in about maybe 2003, I want to say, I had unfortunately coughed up, and in my culture there was Pseudomonas. Now, Pseudomonas really isn't a terrible bacteria or anything like that. It's really, really common, but it does cause issues. So immediately starting, I was put on a every other month dosage of the medicine tobramycin. Now, tobramycin is a heavy bacterial treatment option, and it just regulates and maintains better lung health. It doesn't get rid of it, but it does reduce the growth, which is very important. Because if you don't take it and it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, it's just going to get worse. So this is just something that kind of regulates it and kind of like keeps it down. And then, unfortunately, about the time I was 10, so about in 5th grade, I had to get hospitalized for a short amount of time for a PICC line. Now, what a PICC line is it is a tube that goes generally into the arms. It's always usually placed in the arms. And for me, at least, for when I've had to get it done now in my older age, it's about 43 centimeters. But it runs from the arm and up near the heart. And the goal is that through intravenous transfusions, and using generally tobramycin, when there's like a flare up and just poor lung health, and so they want to try and bring those FEV1 numbers back up. And at that time, I was a little sick, so they gave me intravenous medication, and I bounced back pretty quickly. And the interesting thing is that, like I said, I think that was around the time I was 10. It was kind of amazing for the doctors to see that, because generally by then that would have been like someone's 4th or 5th time in the hospital. That was my first time in the hospital ever needing IV antibiotics. And that's pretty interesting. So, kind of did that. I think I got done in about 2 weeks, and I did a half and half of some time in the hospital, do the treatment, and then I did the other half at home. Unfortunately, it disrupted my school schedule a little bit, taking me out of school like a couple hours earlier, because it was like every 4 hours through the regular day. I would need a tobramycin infusion, and that was about it. And it just was how it was. That was just what you had to do. In addition, at least where I live, it's a lot worse. Another problem that CF patients typically have is sinus issues. I have chronic sinusitis, which is where the growth of nasal polyps happen in the cavities of the sinuses, and so And unfortunately, that can exacerbate allergies. That can cause a higher likelihood of sinus infections. And the worry about that is if you've got a sinus infection and you're getting just constant mucus drainage down the back of your throat and in the upper part of your head, is that will get down to the lungs. And you generally feel pretty crappy anyway. So, um, so I've had to get sinus surgery done a few times to remove those polyps and just try to keep my airways as clear as possible. It's not exactly a fun procedure. It's kind of messy, and you really can't do any like extreme physical activity. Really, a lot of physical activity like running or so. For about 2 to 3 weeks, because the worry is that you will just get a massive nosebleed, and that's not fun at all. That ruins a lot of good clothes, and it also ruins a lot of. It can ruin a lot of good important things. So there was that. So I got through elementary school, went through middle school, and that was another big adjustment. So another problem with cystic fibrosis is malnourishment. It's not for a lack of trying. It's not. It's nothing of like abuse or anything like that. But for some reason, for a pretty much majority of the CF population, weight gain or weight maintenance is really, really difficult. So I think at about maybe 11 to 12 years of age, I think I was only about maybe 4'5" or so, somewhere in the 4 foot range, and I only weighed about maybe 75 to 80 pounds. For some reason, due to digestive issues, we just can't really put on weight. We can try really, really hard, but it's usually pretty often that we cannot put on weight. And that's kind of in combination due to just general bowel issues. Like there's just mucus throughout the entire body besides the lungs, because it's also in the intestines, everything else like that. So it's an utter gooey mess in there. But, weight gain is pretty difficult. Healthy weight gain is pretty difficult. And in addition to what they have also found is that generally those who have better weight get less lung infections, and if they get sick, they can use the excess body weight that they have gained as a little bit of a better fighting chance to stay healthy. Because that gives your body just a little bit extra energy, a little bit extra fuel to fight it off. So when I was in middle school, I had to go in, and we had discussed this on and off over the years, and I finally took the we finally had the discussion of, I think we need to give you a gastrointestinal feeding tube. And what the idea of it is, and it's worked well for so many people, is that, you don't use it during the day, but when you go to sleep, you will be pumped with usually like formula, like Insure, for example, if you guys know what that is, a Boost, if some of you guys know that. And the idea is that it pumps you overnight while you're sleeping. It helps you put on the weight, and then you can go about your regular day. You can do what you need, and you just go and you eat whatever you want to eat throughout the day, and then you go back to bed the next night and you get another overnight feed. And this worked out really, really well. In a few years, I bulked up pretty well. I think I got up to about 150 pounds for someone of my age and for my build, which was really, really good. My body mass index just shot up. Now, unfortunately, because I had gotten a little bit later in life, and the changes that one goes through and around their middle school and especially high school years, I kind of have a little bit of a stunted growth. My younger brothers are two of them are 5'10" or over, and I'm stuck at 5'6". So I think if I had gotten a gastrointestinal feeding tube probably when I was, an infant or a couple years of age, I think without a doubt I probably would be at about 6 feet tall, if not a little bit more. So my body mass index shot up, which was great. I got the sinus polyps taken care of and everything else like that. Then, unfortunately, we got into high school, and that's where things went a little bit sideways, so to speak. Unfortunately, and I don't know really what caused it, but I got sick fairly often. I would have to go into the hospital at least for 2 to 3 weeks, at least once a year. And that's frustrating, especially in high school, because there is such a massive amount of work that needs to be done. So, you're taking algebra, Spanish, history, English. You're taking about 6 to 7 classes of pure schoolwork, and you have to get stuff done. And it's really, really hard to keep up on the work when you're hospitalized. Because you're not there to see what's going on, and you have to have a really strong grasp of the stuff before you left to make it through and succeed. And that's pretty difficult, especially when there's new material being presented in class. So unfortunately, luckily my freshman year I was fine. I didn't have to go into the hospital. I did miss a little bit of school for a completely different reason, but sophomore year, junior year, and senior year, I had to go into the hospital for IVs due to a pulmonary exacerbation. Then, got through high school and was pretty good for the most part. And then unfortunately, I was still getting sick. I actually deferred my diploma in 2013 to continue my education because I was on an individualized education program or an IEP, and that was really due to my CF and, in addition, my prematurity. So I needed some assistance in getting some stuff done and just needing extra time and some minor assistive things to help me in school. Excuse me. But with that being stated, pretty healthy for the most part. So I deferred my diploma. I went to secondary school, so to speak, or vocational school. I got sick in 2013, had to be hospitalized. Got sick in 2014 when I first started my IT training. I got sick in 2015 of my first year of vocational school in IT. And then luckily in 2016 I was perfectly fine. I didn't get sick once, didn't have to go into the hospital, nothing like that. And then in 2017 I had to get hospitalized again for about 10 days for another pulmonary exacerbation. Unfortunately, I didn't have school to back me up. I was done with school by 2016. And I missed about a week and a half to 2 weeks of work, which wasn't the end of the world, but it did suck, especially being at a job that I really, really love. So, with all that stated, I've unfortunately had a string of pulmonary exacerbations that ran from really 2014 through 2017, with only one single year being a lapse year where I was perfectly fine. Other than that, I've been in the hospital at least 1 to 2 weeks for treatment. And I've worked so hard to try and keep myself out of that. But I want to flip to a positive thing at least. So, about the second hospitalization or so back in my high school years, so about in 2010 or 2011, there was a new drug that was coming out that what it would do and what it does is it allows water and salt to pass through the cells much easier. Without this drug, there's just a genetic problem where water and salt just do not pass through the cell as well. With this, it kind of corrects that a little bit and helps make it easier. And in turn, it will actually make it easier to cough out mucus. Now, unfortunately, at least when this drug was announced, it only works for about maybe 5% of the cystic fibrosis population. One thing I didn't mention was this. Cystic fibrosis is not necessarily a cut and dry situation in terms of how it is. It's not like lung cancer where you only have. Well, I'm sorry to anyone if I've offended in this statement. I can only think of lung cancer. I'm sorry. With lung cancer, at least, you can generally see where it is. And you have kind of a cut and dry sameness to it in what it does, how to treat it, what drugs you can use, etc. Cystic fibrosis literally has thousands and thousands of mutations in it. So what I have is the Delta 508 and the G551 combination. It comes from both of my parents. There are so many different genetic combinations of cystic fibrosis that what will work for one person will maybe not work for another person. In some cases, maybe they really don't have to do a lot of breathing treatments as often, but they have weight issues. They really need to work more on gaining weight. Others, weight is not the problem, and they're just having tough times with their lungs. There's plenty of different combinations of cystic fibrosis that is really difficult to get down on what each of these combinations do, but I can only say it from my experience and what I have. I believe it was the Delta 508 gene that I have. Yeah, it is the Delta 508. The drug that they were coming out with helps with that gene. What it does is it allows salt and water to pass through the body and pass through the cells much easier. And it really boosted things up. My pulmonary function, which was typically like 94, 97, 95, it shot up so much that there were times I was hitting 101, 102, 100s, 99s, 97s, 98s. So I didn't really stray too far from my base of like not upper 90s or so, upper mid 90s, but this drug boosted me quite a bit. In addition to just good airway clearance and being on top of my drugs and everything like that I have to take to just kind of make it throughout the day, really helped. I'd still get sick sometimes, and that would be difficult, but, boosted things. And that definitely works really well for me, and still works well. The great news and the positivity that I can offer with that is that they have actually done clinical trials on other combinations of CF, and this style of drug is slowly becoming bigger and bigger and more available to the CF population. So where does that kind of leave me now? Well, I got the G-tube, the gastrointestinal tube removed in about maybe 2015, 2016, I think, maybe at the absolute latest. I've never had to use another tube feeding overnight, and that works out really, really well. I've maintained my weight and then some quite well. My lung function is still pretty high. I'm generally pretty healthy. I don't miss too many treatments. And if I'm feeling kind of sick, I'll bump it up to 2, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, sometimes in some cases. Because when you're in the hospital, it's exercise, treatments, and eating. A lot of it is eating. A lot of it is treatments, especially. Good amount of eating too, but a lot of it is treatments and exercise, physical activity. And you're just getting your infusions all the same. I've actually felt pretty good. I did have a little bit of a exacerbation back in January-ish or February-ish, but I managed to increase my airway clearance to about 3 to 4 times a day, and I felt wonderful. I managed to keep myself out of the hospital. Unfortunately, nowadays, at least to how I feel, with that string of about 7 years where I was going into the hospital at least once per year, and knowing that the disease just progressively gets worse, I have always been afraid going into clinic to get the bad news. Hey, listen, you're not doing too great. I think we should put you on IVs, and that means that you're going to have to miss out on life for a little bit. And it's a frustrating thing. It is such a frustrating situation. Yeah. But let me kind of give you at least a little bit of happiness. So this is how I see the world. And I would say, luckily, at least a good amount of people that I know that have CF or associated with cystic fibrosis, they kind of look at this too. And I do apologize if I get emotional about this. It's a touchy subject to talk about, and it's a delicate subject to talk about, but it's a passionate subject that I would like to talk about. To me, there is so much I have to do in my life. Stuff that I don't want to do, and my day in the life with me is pretty busy. I get up, I have to do about 30 to 40 minutes of treatments. I have to take oral medications to work on the various things that are wrong with my body. I take an allergy pill, I take a vitamin pill, I take Kalydeco, which is the drug that I mentioned earlier that does the water and salt distribution better. I take Creon to help me digest my food better because my pancreas is damaged from the cystic fibrosis. There's the threat and worry of having cystic fibrosis related diabetes, which is like a cross between type 1 and type 2. And it's just its own different animal. Being on all these inhaled medications from albuterol to having to do a saline solution to tobramycin to kill the Pseudomonas and other bacteria in my lungs, and having to maintain and keep on top of that, and having to do treatments, especially 3 to 4 times a day, meaning that you're missing out probably about 2 hours of your life close every single day. Every single day you are losing at about 2 hours of your day to do things. And you especially, this is tough, for a regular 20-something-year-old person, they may wait until about maybe an hour before they have to go to work to get up and, brush their teeth, comb their hair, get their clothes on, and just head out the door and go do their thing. For me, I've got to get up like 2.5 hours earlier than that before a day at work starts for me. And because I have to fit those treatments in, because if I don't do those treatments, I'll just get sick and I can't work. And unfortunately, cystic fibrosis is a really, really expensive disease. But the way that I look at it is this. All of us only have a finite amount of time on this earth. We don't know if we're going to live to be 90. We don't know if we're going to live to only be 19. And I find, personally, the way that I want to live my life is I want to experience as much as I can, get to spend time and meet as many people as I can, get to enjoy life as much as I can, get to love as much as I can, get to be happy as long as I can. Because the day when my health hits the slope and there's no longer any power left, and I'm at the crossroads of a lung transplant, which you know, it would fix the lung issues. It would definitely fix the lung issues. And I wouldn't have to do as much in that maintenance department, but I'd have to take so many anti-rejection meds. It's crazy. And in turn, you know, just because you get a lung transplant does not always mean that you are going to come out of that scathe-free. Beyond just taking the anti-rejection meds, you also may not get a pair of lungs, or you may be doing everything you can to keep those new lungs, and your body will still reject them. Or, you know, maybe you never need a lung transplant, but you just get sick. You just get sick and you cannot work anymore. I take it as I'm going to enjoy and do as much as I can in my life and make as many connections as I can and live my life to the fullest, because I don't know when it's going to be over. And I want to look back on my life and say, you know what? Sucks the hand I was dealt, but you know what? I got to experience and do so much that it was a life well worth lived. There's not much I can do to change what I have. I could choose to be bitter at the world. I can choose to be angry. I can choose to be as antisocial and as disgusted with everything as I would want to be if I really chose that route. But that's not productive. It's not productive with my time, and it's not productive with my energy. And I feel that if I've only let's say that I live really healthy into my to be 40. You know what? That's 40 years of really good living. Didn't have it, not without its hardships, whatsoever. But dang, without a doubt, it was a good 40 years. And personally for me, especially, you know, in 2018 now, you know, there's so many medical advancements that's coming out in the care for cystic fibrosis that it's absolutely amazing. You know, there's these new medications that are coming out. There's new therapies that are available. We're on such a cutting edge of care that people are living longer than expected. If you guys may not believe this, but there was at one point many years ago, probably even back in the 1980s, before all this stuff came about, that the average life expectancy was about, like, really into your 20s. It's grown to age 37 to 38 now. Just think how high that could get years ahead. You know, it's taken a while. It really is. But we're making improvements. This disease takes time, and it does suck. You know, I have to gather up nebula, and I have to gather up my masks that I do my daily airway clearance with. I have to clean those in alcohol. There's a lot of sterilization that's there. I have to be on top of taking all of my pills. I have to be on top of, you know, keeping appointments. I have to be really, really in tune with my body to see if I'm getting sick or not. I have to be, careful in some of the places that I go to. If I'm going out to a bar or so, you know, is there smoking there? Is if there is, probably not a good idea to go. Oh, sure, my friends are going, and so, but that's probably not a good environment for my lungs. And I have to also be on top of, like, just in terms of, hey, we're gonna go and party like for the next 5 days. Is it more important to go out and party and have fun and everything like that, or is it better to be kind of responsible and hey, guys, I can make a compromise. I can stay out until 11, but I gotta get home and I gotta go do treatments, and so it's a tough, tough act. It's a really, really tough thing to deal with. But at the end of the day, the if you're on top of it and you're resilient and you've got a good attitude, yeah, you may miss out on stuff, but your quality of life and your health will be so much better well into the future. What you're doing now when you're well, for me, my early to getting close to mid-20s is going to help me greatly, 7 to 10 years from now when I'm in my 30s. And what I do in my 30s will help me into my 40s. What I do in my 40s will help me in my 50s, so on and so forth. Can't guarantee that I will be able to live my entire life without needing a lung transplant. Personally, I have a goal in life where I do not want to get a lung transplant just because of the risk associated with it, the expense associated with it, the recovery associated with it, and the risk of just having it fail. If I have to live my life with crappy lungs, but it means that I can still live, that's something I can accept. That's something I can take. But kind of with everything, I choose to personally take it in my mind and take it as my goal to enjoy with the time that I have, do what I can that's enjoyable but still good for my health, and make as many dreams that I have become reality. I work in IT. I got to go to school to learn how to work on computers. That was a little bit of a dream that I had when I was in later high school, and I got through it and I did well. I did well in my classes. I did very well. I got my driver's license. That's a goal that a lot of people want to achieve. Well, for someone with cystic fibrosis, that can get, being sick can get in the way of that. I managed to do that. There's a lot of things that my disease, unfortunately, does hold me back from in some regards. But like I said, it's the quality of life, not the quantity of life, that matters. And I think that's actually the best way that I can describe it. My quality of life matters more to me than the quantity. The quantity is important, don't get me wrong. That's something we can all hope for. But the quality of life, that's the bigger thing. So, I take it as I just really want to be as positive as I can, do what I can, be who I want to be. And cystic fibrosis is not going to stop me. The other part of it is that cystic fibrosis is a part of me, but it is not me. It does not define me. It's just a small bump in life. And to many people, I know that this is a very tough disease. It is a tough disease without a doubt. And I know that it's led to a lot of people with heartbreak over they themselves just being sick, or loved ones, family members dying of this terrible disease. And it sucks so much. But the way that I see it is it's only a small piece. Doesn't make me who I am. There's so much more to me than just a disease. So, with that, guys, I don't know really what else to say. That's kind of like my story for the most part with cystic fibrosis. I know that I talk about it a little bit here and there, and I will more than likely talk about little tiny pieces here and there. But the one thing that I definitely want to say is, because of this is the month of May, and I'm just saying this in general too, um, spread awareness. Uh, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation website is linked down below. If you're interested in donating, you absolutely can. If you're interested in the walks, because they've got walks going on the entire month of May and even a bit into June for cystic fibrosis, it's called Great Strides. I'll leave a link there as well. Um, this disease, I hope someday will be completely eradicated. I want it completely gone. And I think if I'm healthy enough and if I can live long enough, I might be able to see the day where a cure is brought up and shown and proven. And I may get to be a participant in that. This disease is tough. This disease is something that you have to be on top of every single day, but I believe in hope. I believe that there is something out there that will make this disease become a thing of the past. So, thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, by all means, go ahead and ask. I'm more than willing to answer some stuff. I'm pretty open when it comes to my disease. I actually did talks about cystic fibrosis from really about the time I was in first grade to even when I worked at a school as an IT technician. I would volunteer for like a lunch break to go and talk to the medical students and tell them about cystic fibrosis. I feel that I've managed to, in a very, very small way, at least spread awareness and inform people. And if you guys have any questions, I'm more than willing to share. I'm more than willing to share any answers. So, thank you all for watching. Hope you have a great day. Like I said, down in the description, there are links to the CF Foundation, Great Strides, everything else like that. And I will see you all again next time. Good night.